The blast that changed everything. Rain fell softly over the old mining colony, a place where humans and aliens worked side by side to rebuild after years of war. Among them was Ethan, a quiet human engineer known for fixing things no one else could. He didn't talk much, but people trusted him because when something broke, he stayed until it worked again, even if it took all night. That evening, the sky was a strange color, a mix of violet and red. Warning of a storm coming, Ethan was in the power control room when he heard the sharp alarm, a low, rhythmic pulse that meant one thing: explosive leak. He ran outside, his boots slipping on the wet metal walkway, and saw smoke rising near the main reactor. Sparks lit up the rain like falling stars, and beside the leak stood Lyra, the alien woman who worked as a medical assistant in the nearby outpost. Lyra's pale blue skin shimmered under the emergency lights, her four-fingered hands trembling as she tried to close the valve. She was brave, but untrained for such danger. The energy pulse in the reactor was growing faster, each second bringing it closer to critical level. Ethan shouted her name, but the roar of the reactor drowned his voice. Without thinking, he sprinted through the smoke, his lungs burning. He could see the containment field flickering, the energy shaking the air like thunder trapped in a bottle. Lyra turned toward him just as he reached her. Her wide, golden eyes were filled with fear. Ethan grabbed her by the arm and pulled her down behind the metal barrier. He barely had time to throw his body over hers before the world went white. The explosion wasn't sound, it was silence, a pressure that crushed the air from his chest. The shockwave tore through the compound, flinging debris like knives. Heat scorched the ground, and for a moment there was nothing but darkness and the faint echo of his own heartbeat. When Ethan woke, he was lying on the ground, his vision blurred. Smoke curled through the ruins, and he could hear faint voices calling for survivors. His clothes were burned, his skin blistered, but he was alive. He looked down and saw Lyra still under him, untouched, breathing softly, protected by his own body. Hours later, the rescue teams came. They pulled them out and took them to the medical station. The doctors couldn't understand how Ethan survived the blast's center. His body had absorbed more radiation than anyone should, but somehow, his vital signs were strong. When he finally opened his eyes in the sterile white room, Lyra was sitting beside him, her face pale. She whispered, "You saved me." But before he could answer, the door slid open. A tall figure in dark armor stepped inside, the mark of the planetary army gleaming on his chest plate. His voice was low, commanding. "Ethan Cole, you're coming with me." Ethan blinked, confused. His mind was still foggy. "Why? What's going on?" he asked. The soldier didn't answer. He just handed Ethan a folded metal card, etched with a strange insignia, one Ethan had never seen before. On it was Lyra's name, and below it, a seal of the Imperial Defense Command. Lyra's hands shook as she looked at it. Ethan's instincts told him something wasn't right. He had shielded her from an explosion that should have killed them both. But now, soldiers were appearing at his door, too fast, too organized, like they had been waiting for this moment all along. And as the thunderstorm rumbled outside, Ethan realized the explosion had not been an accident. It was the beginning of something far larger than either of them could imagine. The summons. Ethan sat up slowly, his body aching from the explosion. The sterile scent of the medical bay filled his nose, and the soft hum of machines surrounded him like whispers in the dark. Across the room, Lyra stood frozen, her golden eyes fixed on the soldier who had just entered. The man's armor reflected the harsh white lights, and his presence filled the small room with quiet authority. He didn't introduce himself, but everyone could tell he wasn't an ordinary soldier. He carried the insignia of the Imperial Vanguard, an elite unit that only appeared when something critical was at stake. Ethan looked from the soldier to Lyra, his confusion deepening. "You've got the wrong man," he said. "I'm just an engineer." But the soldier's cold gaze didn't waver. He handed Ethan a small hollow device, and when Ethan touched it, an image flickered to life. It showed the explosion site. Slow motion, every frame clear. In the center of the blast was Ethan shielding Lyra, but instead of vaporizing, a strange blue sphere of energy surrounded them. Stopping the fire midair, Lyra gasped softly, her hand trembling as she watched. The soldier spoke in a calm, almost mechanical tone. "That wasn't a shield we know of. That energy wasn't human, and it wasn't alien either. We need to know what happened to you." Ethan frowned. "You think I caused that?" he asked. The soldier's expression didn't change. "We don't think, Mr. Cole. We know you did something impossible." The soldier stepped closer, his boots echoing on the metal floor. "You're being summoned by the Imperial Defense Command for questioning. Effective immediately," he said. Lyra stepped between them, her voice shaking. "He just saved lives. He doesn't deserve to be treated like a criminal." The soldier paused, his visor reflecting her worried face. "Ma'am, this isn't punishment. It's protection. You both might be targets now." The word targets made Ethan's stomach tighten. He didn't understand, but he could feel that something wasn't right. The explosion hadn't been random, and now the military's interest made it even stranger. "Let me talk to my team first," Ethan said firmly. The soldier shook his head. "There's no time." Outside, the storm raged louder, thunder rolling through the sky like the growl of a beast. The soldier guided Ethan toward a transport waiting outside the facility. Its engines hummed low, ready to take off. Lyra followed, refusing to stay behind. "If you take him, I'm going too," she said. The soldier hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. But once we reach the command center, you both follow orders." The transport rose into the storm, lightning flashing across the horizon. Ethan looked through the window, watching the colony shrink below. He could still see the smoking crater where the explosion had happened, and something about it felt wrong, like the blast hadn't destroyed, it had opened. As they flew deeper into the night, Lyra turned to him and whispered, "I felt it too. That energy when you shielded me. It wasn't from you, Ethan. It was like something else reached through you." Her words chilled him, because deep inside, he remembered the moment of the blast, the pressure, the silence, the light. It hadn't felt like death. It had felt like being touched by something alive. By the time the ship broke through the clouds, the world below was lost in darkness. Ahead, he could see the looming structure of the Imperial Command Station, a black fortress hanging in orbit like a silent giant. Somewhere inside that place, answers waited. But Ethan already knew that every answer would come with a cost. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what was coming. The soldier's words echoed in his mind. "You did something impossible." Ethan didn't know how or why, but one thing was clear. The explosion hadn't just changed his life. It had changed something far bigger, something the Empire was desperate to control. The Black Fortress. The transport descended through layers of heavy storm clouds until the dark outline of the Imperial Command Station came into view. It was a floating fortress of black alloy and flickering lights, orbiting the colony like a silent predator. The entire structure pulsed faintly with energy, surrounded by defense drones that moved in precise formation. Ethan had never seen anything like it. The design was alien in shape, but unmistakably human in function. A perfect fusion of two civilizations that were once at war. The sight alone was enough to make him feel small, insignificant against the immensity of the Empire's power. When the transport finally docked, soldiers in black armor escorted Ethan and Lyra down long metallic corridors. The air was colder here, carrying a faint hum from deep within the structure. Every few steps, holographic panels blinked to life, scanning their faces and measuring their vitals. Ethan noticed the way the soldiers glanced at him. Not with hostility, but with something else, curiosity mixed with fear. They knew what he had survived, and none of them understood how. Lyra stayed close to him, her hand brushing his arm as if afraid he might vanish. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken questions. At last, they entered a vast chamber lined with glass walls that looked out into space. Stars shimmered beyond the transparent panels, distant and cold. In the center of the room stood a tall woman in a long white coat, her silver hair tied tightly behind her head. Her eyes glowed faintly with an artificial light that hinted at cybernetic implants. "Ethan Cole," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "I am Commander Eris Vale, head of the Imperial Energy Division. You survived an explosion that should have vaporized everything within 2 kilometers. I intend to find out why." Ethan nodded slowly. "I don't know what happened. I just tried to protect her." Eris's gaze shifted briefly to Lyra. "Yes, the medical assistant from Outpost 9. Your presence complicates things, Miss Lyra." The commander motioned to a holodisplay beside her. The image showed Ethan and Lyra inside the blast, frozen in a perfect sphere of blue light. "This energy pattern," she continued, "matches no known weapon, no shield, and no reactor signature. However, similar readings appeared once before, during the lost expedition on Titan Station. Years ago." Ethan frowned. "What happened there?" Eris paused. "Everyone vanished, except one human. He was found days later. With the same energy signature in his blood." The words hit Ethan like a hammer. He had never been to Titan Station, yet something deep in his mind stirred. A faint flash of light, the feeling of being submerged in silence. He looked at Lyra, but her expression was unreadable. "You think I'm connected to that?" he asked. Eris turned away, her voice soft but precise. "I don't think, Mr. Cole, I know. The energy that saved you came from within you. It bonded with your biological field, transforming it into something else. Something powerful." Lyra took a step forward, her voice trembling. "If that energy came from him, it also protected me. Doesn't that mean it's not dangerous?" The commander looked at her with a mix of pity and caution. "Power doesn't care if it saves or destroys. It only follows its nature. That's why we must understand it before it understands us." Guards approached, attaching a small metallic collar around Ethan's neck. It wasn't painful, but he could feel the hum of energy beneath it. "A stabilizer," Eris explained. "It monitors your radiation output. If it spikes again, we'll know." Ethan's jaw tightened. "So I'm your prisoner now?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned to Lyra. "You're free to stay as his witness. But understand this. Whatever he touched, it changed him. He's not the same man who entered that explosion." As they were escorted to their quarters, Lyra whispered, "Ethan, I saw your eyes during the blast. They turned the same color as that light." Ethan didn't respond, but her words echoed in his mind like a warning. That night, as he lay on the metal bunk, staring at the ceiling, he felt something faint beneath his skin. A pulse, gentle but alive. It wasn't his heartbeat, it was something else, something waiting. In the silence of the fortress, as the stars drifted by outside, Ethan began to wonder if the explosion had really been an accident, or if it had been a signal, one that someone, somewhere, had been waiting for. The awakening, the hum of the Imperial fortress never stopped. It was a sound that lived within the metal itself, vibrating faintly through every wall and corridor. Ethan had been kept inside a secure observation chamber for 3 days. Under constant surveillance, machines surrounded him, analyzing his blood, his brain waves, and even the faint electromagnetic field that now pulsed from his body. He had grown used to the flickering lights and the cold detachment of the scientists who came and went like ghosts. But what kept him awake at night wasn't the tests. It was the strange rhythm beneath his skin, a heartbeat that wasn't entirely his own. Lyra was allowed to visit him for a few minutes every day. She tried to act calm, but he could see the fear behind her eyes. The Lyra he had met before the explosion had been gentle, curious, and full of life. Now, she looked over her shoulder before every word, as if someone might be listening. "They're afraid of you," she whispered one evening, her voice trembling. "They think whatever saved us might spread." Ethan frowned. "Spread? Like a disease." She shook her head slowly. "Not a disease, more like an awakening." Her words lingered in his mind long after she was gone. That night, as the fortress drifted through orbit, A storm of static energy rolled through space. Lightning like surges flashed against the observation window, bathing the room in cold blue light. Ethan lay still, staring at the ceiling. When the pulse beneath his skin began to grow stronger, it was as if the storm outside was calling to him, matching his heartbeat. The machines around him flickered, one by one, their screens distorting with waves of interference. He sat up, gripping the side of the bed. A sharp pain stabbed through his skull and his vision blurred. For a moment, he saw shapes in the air, geometric patterns of light swirling around him like constellations. The air crackled with static, and the walls shimmered as if reality itself was bending. Then came the voice, soft but clear, not from outside but from within. "You are the link, Ethan Cole. You opened the gate. And now it cannot be closed," Ethan gasped, the pain subsiding as quickly as it had come. He looked at his hands, faintly glowing with blue energy that faded like mist. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the chamber. The doors hissed open and soldiers rushed in, weapons raised. Commander Eris entered behind them, her calm composure gone. "What did you do?" she shouted. Ethan shook his head, his breath coming fast. "I didn't do anything. It just happened." The machines began to spark violently, one after another, until a burst of energy shattered the observation glass. The soldiers fell back, shielding themselves. Eris stepped forward, scanning the readings on her wrist console. Her eyes widened. "It's the same frequency from Titan Station," she muttered. "The signal is active again." Ethan felt dizzy, the world spinning around him. "Signal? You mean this thing is calling someone?" Eris didn't answer directly. "We thought the anomaly on Titan was destroyed, but if it's reactivated, it means someone or something is responding." Her gaze hardened. "And you're the beacon." Before anyone could react, the entire fortress shook violently. The lights went out, and the emergency shutters sealed the observation deck. A deep rumble echoed through the structure, followed by the voice of the central AI. "Unidentified energy approaching. Impact in 60 seconds. Eris barked orders. "All units to defense positions. Protect the subject." Lyra burst into the room, having forced her way past the guards. "Ethan!" she cried. "The sky outside. It's opening." Ethan turned toward the window, and through the slits of the closing shutters, he saw it. A tear in space itself, glowing the same color as the light that had surrounded them during the explosion. It wasn't a weapon. It was a doorway. The pulse in his body matched the rhythm of the portal. He could feel the energy flowing through him, whispering fragments of memories that weren't his, images of distant worlds, voices of beings that existed beyond time. "They're coming," he whispered, not sure if he was warning Lyra or himself. Commander Eris looked at him, her face pale. "Then, Mr. Cole, you better pray they're friendly." The fortress trembled again, and outside the rift expanded like a blooming star, bathing the entire station in unearthly blue light. Ethan felt his heart racing as the voice within him spoke once more. "The awakening has begun." As the fortress prepared for what was coming, Ethan realized that the explosion had not created the energy. It had unlocked it. Whatever force he had connected to was ancient, intelligent, and now fully awake, and it was coming straight for him. The invasion signal. The fortress shuddered again, and the lights dimmed as if the stars themselves had blinked out. The hum of engines was replaced by the deep, resonant vibration of something vast moving outside. Commander Eris gripped the railing, her voice cutting through the chaos as alarms blared. "All defensive systems online. Lock on to the source of the energy surge." But the computers couldn't track it. It wasn't moving through space. It was folding through it. The readings on the monitors spiked beyond measurable limits, flickering with symbols no one had seen before. Lyra clung to Ethan's arm, her pulse racing. "That light, it's the same color as your aura, Ethan. It's connected to you." Ethan stared through the observation slit at the rift outside. It wasn't a hole or a weapon. It looked alive. Its edges rippled like liquid glass, and within its swirling heart he saw shapes forming. Shadows of colossal structures, like cities built inside the light itself. Every few seconds, faint whispers echoed in his mind. Words he didn't understand but somehow felt. They weren't in any language he knew, but they carried weight. A call that tugged at something deep inside him. The energy inside his body answered with small pulses, each one stronger than the last. He wasn't just reacting to the rift was reacting to him. Eris moved closer, her eyes fixed on the readings from her wrist console. "Cole, you need to stay conscious," she ordered sharply. "Whatever link you formed is stabilizing the anomaly. If you lose control, that thing could consume us all." Ethan tried to steady his breathing, his hands glowing faintly again. "I can't control it," he said through gritted teeth. "It's not listening to me. It's learning from me." Lyra knelt beside him, holding his hand tightly. "Then teach it something good," she whispered, her voice trembling but filled with faith. "Don't let it become what they fear." Outside, the rift expanded until its light swallowed the stars. The Fortress AI's voice trembled with distortion. Unidentified vessels detected. Massive energy signatures approaching. Eris looked out the window in disbelief as enormous silhouettes emerged from the light. Their forms were unlike any known ship. Organic, fluid, and shimmering with veins of blue energy. They moved without thrusters, gliding silently through the void. "That's not an invasion fleet," Lyra said softly. "That's something else." But the Fortress defense systems didn't wait for confirmation. Turrets extended from the hull, firing beams of plasma toward the nearest shape. The energy struck its surface and vanished, absorbed like rain into the sea. The creature, or ship, pulsed once, and a wave of light shot back, not as a weapon, but as a sound. The entire station vibrated, glass shattering, and everyone fell to their knees, clutching their heads. Ethan's vision blurred again, and suddenly he wasn't seeing the fortress anymore. He was somewhere else, standing in a field of blue light, surrounded by towering figures of pure energy. Their faces were shifting, made of memories and stars. "You opened the gate," the voices said in unison, their tone neither cruel nor kind. "The others sealed it long ago, but your kind has called us back." Ethan tried to speak, but his voice came out as a whisper. "I didn't mean to. I was just trying to save someone." The light around him pulsed gently. Compassion. The spark we lost when the first war began. Perhaps this time, it will be different. Then, as quickly as it began, the vision vanished, and he was back inside the fortress, gasping for breath. The alarms had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. Eris stared at him with wide eyes. "What did you do?" she demanded. Ethan wiped blood from his nose, his voice shaking. "They're not here to attack," he said slowly. "They're here because of me, because of what I did." Lyra stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then what are they waiting for?" Ethan looked out into the swirling light, his reflection shimmering in the glass. "They're waiting for us to decide." Outside, the alien vessels drifted closer, their presence calm but overwhelming. Every sensor in the fortress went dark. Every weapon deactivated itself. For the first time, the Empire's most powerful station was completely silent. And in that silence, Ethan understood the truth. Whatever force had chosen him wasn't about destruction. It was about balance. A bridge between two sides of existence that had been at war for centuries. Commander Eris lowered her weapon slowly, her voice uncertain for the first time. "If they're not here to destroy us, then what do they want?" Ethan looked at her, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "They want to talk," he said quietly. "And I think I'm the only one who can understand them." The rift pulsed once more, casting long shadows through the chamber. The alien shapes began to shift and move in patterns that resembled words, a message written in light. As Ethan stepped toward the window, the voice within him whispered again, softer this time. "The gate is open. The choice is yours." And for the first time, Ethan felt no fear, only the weight of what that choice might mean for the entire galaxy. The message of the light, the silence that followed was unlike anything Ethan had ever felt. It wasn't the quiet of peace or safety. It was the stillness that comes before something immense and life-altering. Every heartbeat, every flicker of light in the fortress seemed to echo endlessly. The alien vessels outside hovered motionless, their luminous forms suspended in the void, casting waves of color that rippled like ocean currents across the black sea of space. Commander Eris stood frozen, her fingers trembling slightly above the controls, afraid to touch anything that might trigger another reaction. Lyra clutched Ethan's arm, her breath shallow, her golden eyes locked on the brilliant rift that had swallowed the stars. "They're waiting," she whispered. "But for what?" Ethan didn't answer, because deep within, he already knew, the energy inside him pulsed again, steady, rhythmic, and aware. He could feel the connection stretching across the vastness of the rift. Millions of thoughts, countless voices, and ancient memories flooding toward him. Not as words, but as pure emotion. Joy and sorrow, creation and loss intertwined. The same energy that had saved him from the explosion was now revealing its truth. It wasn't a weapon. It was memory, a living echo of something far older than any empire. He closed his eyes, letting the pulse guide him, and suddenly he was no longer standing inside the fortress. He found himself adrift in light, surrounded by floating shards of history. He saw towering beings of radiant energy shaping worlds with their hands, weaving galaxies like threads of silk. Then came fire, war, betrayal. He saw these beings turn against one another, destroying stars, tearing holes through the fabric of reality. The rift had not been born from technology. It had been the scar of that ancient war, sealed long ago so that nothing living could ever touch it again. And yet, he had touched it. Ethan saw flashes of himself, of Lyra, and the explosion that had bound them together. The energy had chosen them, not by accident but because of what they had done. A selfless act born of compassion, the one thing the ancients had lost in their hunger for power. When his eyes opened again, he was back inside the fortress. The lights flickered, and the air smelled faintly of ozone. Lyra's voice reached him first, soft and panicked. "Ethan, can you hear me?" He nodded slowly, his mind still halfway between two realities. "They're not invaders," he said quietly. "They're survivors of what came before us. They've been asleep inside the rift, waiting for someone. Human enough to listen." Commander Eris frowned, skepticism mixed with fear. "Listen to what exactly?" Ethan turned toward the observation glass, his reflection faintly outlined in blue light. "They're warning," he said. "They say the war that ended their kind is beginning again, and this time it's our turn." Eris took a step forward, her voice sharp. "Are you telling me they can see the future?" Ethan shook his head. "Not the future, just the pattern. The same hunger that destroyed them lives in us now. They're offering a chance to break it." Lyra's grip tightened around his hand, her voice trembling. "And if we don't?" Ethan looked at her, his expression heavy. "Then the rift won't stay open. It'll consume everything to start over." The fortress trembled slightly as if responding to his words. The alien vessels outside began to move again, forming a circle around the rift, their movements precise, almost ritualistic. Light flowed between them in streams, connecting like veins of energy across the void. The station's sensors came alive with readings beyond comprehension. "They're transmitting something," Eris said, her tone softer now. "It's not a weapon signature. It's information, encoded in light." Ethan nodded. "They're trying to share their memory, to show us how to stop what's coming." Suddenly, a surge of light filled the entire chamber, wrapping Ethan in its glow. The machines around him overloaded, sparks flying as power conduits exploded. Lyra screamed his name, reaching for him, but the light enveloped her too, pulling them both into a world of pure energy. The last thing they saw was Eris reaching toward them as the fortress vanished in the brightness. Ethan and Lyra floated in endless light again, but this time it was different. Warm, vast and filled with voices that no longer felt distant. The beings appeared before them once more, their forms clearer now, less alien and more human in shape. One of them extended a hand made of starlight. "The cycle must end," it said, its voice echoing inside their minds. "You hold the key, the power born not of strength but of mercy. Show your kind another way." Ethan took the glowing hand, and a wave of understanding rushed through him. He saw every possible path humanity could take, one leading to ruin, another to rebirth. All of it rested on the choices made now. The light around them dimmed, and they were back inside the fortress once more. The alarms were silent, the soldiers gone. Only the stars remained outside, peaceful and still. Lyra fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "What did they do to us?" she whispered. Ethan looked at his hands, still glowing faintly with that impossible light. "They didn't do anything," he said quietly. "They trusted us." For the first time since the explosion, he didn't feel fear. He felt purpose. The message of the light wasn't a threat, it was an invitation. And now he knew what he had to do. The final choice. The world outside the fortress had changed. Yet it looked almost the same. Stars shimmered in their silent dance, but Ethan could feel that space itself had shifted in a way only he could sense. Every sound carried an echo. Every light held a pulse that connected to the same rhythm beating beneath his skin. The message from the ancient beings lingered in his mind like a dream that refused to fade. Commander Eris stood beside the central console, her face pale but resolute, the faint tremor in her voice betraying the weight of what they had witnessed. "You're saying they left the choice to you?" she asked, disbelief and fear colliding in her tone. Ethan nodded slowly. "Not just to me. To us. Humanity and every species that came after them. They opened the gate, but they won't interfere again. What happens next depends on what we do now." Lyra stood close to him, her hands still faintly glowing with the remnants of the light that had touched them both. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from sleepless hours. But there was something new in her expression, an understanding that had replaced fear. "Then what do they want from us, Ethan?" she asked softly. "Why give us that power if it could destroy everything?" Ethan took a deep breath, staring into the vastness beyond the window. "Because compassion can't be forced," he said quietly. "It has to be chosen. They gave us a second chance, not as punishment, but as a test. If we keep using power the way they once did, without mercy, it'll all happen again." The fortress trembled as the rift began to pulse once more. The ships of light surrounding it moved into perfect alignment, their shapes forming a circle that expanded and contracted with every beat. The energy readings on the monitors spiked again, but this time there was no fear in the air. The entire crew, from soldiers to scientists, stood watching in silence, waiting for Ethan to act. Eris turned toward him, her jaw clenched. "You realize the Empire will see this as a threat," she warned. "They'll want to harness it, weaponize it, or destroy it." Ethan met her gaze calmly. "That's exactly what the ancients did, and it ended their world." A deep rumble echoed through the fortress as the power grids overloaded. Sparks rained down, and the floor vibrated like a heartbeat. Ethan stepped forward to the control station, his hands hovering over the holographic interface. "The energy inside me, inside the rift, it's the same," he said. "If I focus it, I can close the gate before the Empire's fleet arrives." Lyra grabbed his arm, panic flashing across her face. "If you do that, you'll be trapped between worlds. You won't survive." Ethan smiled faintly, his eyes soft but steady. "Maybe I won't, but humanity will. Someone has to show them that not all power needs to be used for conquest." Eris moved toward him, her voice breaking for the first time. "Ethan, there must be another way." He turned to her, the blue light from the rift reflecting in his eyes. "There always is," he said gently, "but this is the one I can live with." He placed his hand on the console, and the room filled with a blinding surge of light. The rift outside responded instantly, its energy swirling faster. consuming the alien vessels that had come to bear witness. Lyra screamed his name as the fortress shook violently, and for a moment it felt like the entire universe was breathing in. In that final moment, Ethan heard the voices again, not as words, but as music. A harmony that resonated through every atom of his being. "The gate closes, but the light remains," they whispered. "You have done what we could not." The energy around him folded inward, wrapping him in warmth and then silence. The blinding light faded, leaving the void peaceful once more. The rift was gone, the fortress stabilized, and the stars returned to their quiet vigil. Lyra fell to her knees, tears spilling down her cheeks. Her hand pressed against the console where Ethan had stood, but there was nothing left except a faint trace of blue light. Commander Eris stood behind her, unable to speak. The readings on her display showed 0 anomalies, 0 energy surges. The gate had closed completely. The ancient scar in space was healed weeks later. The Empire would search for Ethan Cole, labeling him as both a savior and a traitor. But across the colonies, whispers began to spread, stories of the man who had faced the light and chose mercy over power. Lyra carried his memory like a flame, refusing to let it fade. She returned to the colony where it all began, planting a single crystal shard from the wreckage in the soil. It pulsed faintly, alive, a remnant of the same energy that once saved them. And as dawn broke across the horizon, a gentle hum filled the air. The same pulse that once beat inside Ethan's heart, it echoed softly across the barren plains, whispering to those who would come after, a message written not in words, but in hope. The light had not died. It had simply found a new home, waiting for the next soul brave enough to choose kindness when the universe demanded power.